Hi Dave and Nico. Megan said that you were interested in my kayak and how it was set up, so here's a bit of a video. This kayak is a Diablo Paddle Sports made in Austin. It's an Adios and it's thermal formed. It's not the roto molded kayaks that you get at Walmart. It's pretty durable, but I've made a few mods to it. You can see it's a pretty wide kayak. It's quite stable, easy to stand up in. It's got a pretty flat bottom, but no keel, really. And I'll explain that a little later. The first mod I made to this kayak was I got rid of the footsteps that you use for paddling, because the chair I have, this is a Larry chair, the chair is so high you really don't need footsteps. So I took the footsteps out and I screwed in some cedar and I made this little deck, and that deck is for my cooler there. I like the chair nice and high. It's a lot higher than it was before. I used to have the chair sitting down in the bottom, but it squeaked like crazy down there because it would rub against the plastic whenever you moved. It was quite noisy. But I like it nice and tall because it's much easier to stand up and to sit down. When you're very low in a kayak, you need the lanyard that's up underneath here to stand up, even if you're young. And like I said, this is a Larry chair. I put the Larry chair on a aluminum frame. This frame came from a company called 8020. It's an aluminum extrusion, and it comes pre-anodized. And then I made these plastic brackets that clamp onto the Larry chair and have a T-slide that fits the aluminum and locks here. And it works. It just slides back and forth wherever you want this chair, because it's easier to slide this chair forward for assembling all the gear. And then I want to put the chair back as far as I can get, just to balance out the kayak and make reaching the motor a little easier. I added these things here. I made these are little braces that fit the calves on my legs to give me a little bit more stability when I'm standing. And the way that works, I'll take the camera off and show you. When I'm standing, my calves fit those brackets and give me a bit more stability when I'm casting, or when I'm paddling when I'm standing up, especially if it's, you know, a little bit wavy out. I made them out of a couple of pieces of PVC pipe. I think this is like 4-inch. I just chopped up and then glued it to some 1-inch back here, and then tie wrap it to the chair. And they swivel so that, you know, it fits my legs. On this chair I put a couple of rod holders on the back. I've got a bunch of rod holders on this kayak so that I can move rods around. I like the rods laying down when I'm traveling or when I'm fishing, so they stay out of the way. And you can see from the amount of duct tape on this kayak that I'm clearly Canadian. But the duct tape is an attempt to keep things quiet, because I like to stalk fish when I'm in the swamps. I like to stalk the redfish, and you have to be very quiet. But these kayaks, and all kayaks, are noisy, especially when you're trying to do things like put your paddle away. I put this piece of foam here, this piece of foam here. That's what the foam on there is for. so that when I put the paddle away, it's pretty quiet. The stakeout stick is probably the worst. Trying to get this sucker out without making noise. That's why these are here, that's there. Got a piece here, I got a piece on the stakeout stick itself, so it's pretty quiet. So like I said, this thing is a little bit wide, makes it difficult to paddle. I think it's like 32 or 34 inches wide, so you gotta reach way in the heck over the side of the boat to paddle. And when you do that, it's tiring and it doesn't track well. It doesn't have much of a keel, doesn't like going straight, keeps turning on me. It's a pain to paddle. Great to fish from, nice and stable, a pain to paddle. So I got a motor. Of course, with an electric motor, you need a battery. Battery goes in here. This is one of those true deep cycle batteries. I think it's a Mighty Max, size 24. It's made for like wheelchairs and whatnot, and it lasts all day in this kayak. I've been out over 8 hours at times and come back with plenty of power. And it goes in right here. I could have got a smaller battery, I didn't know at the time though. And it straps in place because you never know. I've never tipped this kayak over, but I don't want to lose a battery if I do. Straps in like this. This battery is actually for a wheelchair. Now I got one of these Minn Kota electric trolling motors. It's transom mount. Wasn't real expensive. It's the smallest one I think they make. Saltwater edition. Mounts right here. And I modified the motor a little bit because this thing is actually made for a boat, right? Which are a lot heavier than kayaks. What's important to me is not the thrust. What's important to me is the depth. I need to go real shallow. So what I did is I set it up on my milling machine with this straight up and down. Brought a milling cutter in here, started up the motor so it was spinning pretty quick, and then cut an inch off of each one of these blades. And then I cut an inch off the skeg. Now this motor is effectively running about 2 inches shallower. I can run in about 8 inches of water if it's calm. If it's not calm, then I need a little more water because then it gurgles. And it hooks up like this. And to launch the motor, there's a little lever here. It's a bit of a pain to reach, but you can do it. I've had no problems reaching it. Next, what I put on is my lunch cooler, because I'm usually out all day. I need something to drink, something to eat. This is my lunch cooler here. It has a couple of rod holders in it too. At one point I was trying to simplify things by putting my lunch in the fishing cooler, and that works fine until you catch fish. Then your lunch gets pretty stinky. But this happens to fit right in here quite nicely by accident. Straps in like this. And I have a lunch cooler. Keep some frozen drinks, some food in there. Then I move my chair back and lock it down. Next, my fish cooler goes on. Usually have it full of ice. And the reason I do this is because your fish tastes a lot better if you put it on ice right away. It just straps with this bungee cord onto this deck. You can see the duct tape here. There's a reason for it. It's because when you're fly fishing, your stripping tends to get caught on anything available, anything. So the duct tape is an attempt to keep the strippings from getting caught on these little hooks and whatnot. Next thing I need to do is figure out some way to prevent it from getting caught on this. That's a pain, but I deal with it. Then I got my rods. Typically fish with this rod here. It's a tiny little, almost ultralight. It's a Crappy Max from Bass Pro. I think it's 5 feet long. What does it say in here? 5 foot 6 inches long. And I love it. It is not what everybody else uses for redfish, but I'm telling you, this rod is so light that I can cast with this rod all day long. Doesn't bother my wrist at all. I've got it set up with a relatively light rubber bait here. This is, I think this is chicken on a chain or chicken of the sea, one of those chicken rubber lures, either by DOA or Down South Lures. They work pretty good. And I just keep it on a rod like that. This one typically goes here when I'm traveling. The other rod I use is, I made this rod myself actually, and I've got this reel from Cadence. It's a CS8. It's a pretty nice reel. That reel is a pen. It's expensive, and the darn thing doesn't, the bail doesn't trip very well. When you cast and you try to reel, get the bail to trip, it's kind of stiff. This one is beautiful and cheap. These aren't very expensive at all. You need to look them up, cadence.com. I've got it set up with a little bit bigger lure and bait. It's got some weight on it. This one here doesn't have any weight on it. It's for fishing shallow. I can't cast as far with it. This has weight on it. It's for fishing a little bit deeper, maybe up to about 2 feet deep, and it casts a bit further. And it's a longer rod. I think this rod is 6'6" and extra fast action. Nice rod. I am going to change both of these rods. This handle set up here looks cool, but what a pain in the ass when you've got them in a rod holder. They tend to get caught. So when you catch a fish and you're trying to get it out of here and it's jammed, it just frustrates the heck out of you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these off and put a regular old grip like this one on it. It looks boring, but they work nice. This is my backup rod in case I break one of these before I get out there, and it's got a heavy weight on it. It actually has heavier line on it too, and a little bit cheaper reel. It's a Cadence CS7, but pretty nice. And then I like to fly fish. This is an 8-weight saltwater by Sage, and it goes in here. So when I'm motoring, this is the way the rods are set up. And when I'm fishing, I try to keep 2 rods down low so that when I'm fishing, my back cast doesn't get caught in rods that would be, standing up straight. And then when I'm fly fishing, I swap the rods that I'm, put one of these spinning reels in this location, take my fly rod out, and if this sucker is in here, then everything's pretty low and I'm not catching it with my back cast as much. And then this is the rod holder that I use when I'm fishing, and I modified it a little bit so that it helps when I'm fly fishing too. This is a standard rod. It's not a two-handed switch or anything like that, so it doesn't have a butt on it. But I milled a slot, you can see, in this holder, so that if I catch a fish, I just stick it in like that, and it holds the rod for me. And when I'm fly fishing, I'm usually stalking along a bank, and I like to keep, maybe 25 feet of line out, because typically I'm not casting much more than 25-30 feet. That way, if I see a redfish, I pull it out, I can strip a bit back and make my cast right away. I don't have to start false casting to get line out. It's already out. My lure case here, I've been taking less and less with me all the time. Got the bigger baits on this side, some smaller ones on here, a selection of different weighted hooks. They all have these screw-on type things. They work pretty darn good. And I've got some flies here, some shrimp imitation, some crab imitation, and some other flies in here. I haven't tried this spoon yet. The one I've been catching most fish on actually is this clouser. It doesn't have a weed guard. It catches a bunch of weeds, but it works pretty darn good. It doesn't look very good, but yeah, it works pretty good. And I keep a little knife in here, line clippers, and a couple of top waters just in case. What the heck, huh? This usually goes under here. My net usually goes underneath there too until I start catching fish, and I just leave it right up there. My life jacket. I always wear my life jacket because I always fish by myself. There ain't nobody else out there with me most of the places I go. And finally, sometimes when I'm fishing, I like to wade fish, which means I get out of the kayak and I'm walking, as long as it's reasonably sandy on the bottom. And I put this on. Just around my waist. And what it is, it's an old diver's weight belt, piece of PVC. So when I catch a fish, I don't have to put the rod in my teeth or under my arm. I just put it in there. And then it has a holder here for my pliers. So that's what I wear when I'm wade fishing. And then when I'm wade fishing, I use this. And this is something I learned from Salt Strong. I learned a bunch of stuff from them. When I'm wade fishing, I take this, and it's about 40 feet long. It's got a clip on it. I just put it around my waist, clip it, and I drag the kayak behind me about 40 feet. Because as nice as this kayak is, it's got that flat bottom which makes it stable. It is horrible for hull slap, and you need to be quiet. So I like to have it a little bit away from me if there's any waves and whatnot out there. And then, what do you do with your keys and your wallet, right? Because usually you're parked in some sketchy area, along a canal somewhere. You don't even want to leave your truck there, but you certainly don't want to leave your keys and your wallet behind. So what I did was this front hatch. I tie wrapped this waterproof case. It's like a camera case or something. Tie wrapped at the bottom of the hatch. I got a couple extra liters and whatnot in there that I'm probably not going to need, but you might need them. Put my keys, put my wallet in there. Close the box up. It's watertight. Close the lid. And I got all my stuff. So that's the kayak. I was out a couple days ago. Tuesday it was. I went to Port O'Connor. Went to the public park just north of Port O'Connor. Caught a nice sea trout there. Saw some nice redfish. Didn't catch any though. So that's it, Dave.